Happy Friday, DawgNation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. It is a getaway day for me, our buddy Connor Riley as well. Last day for us before vacation, but have no fear. We are loaded on today's program. We're going to hear from former Georgia coach Mark Richt talking about Kirby Smart. We're going to evaluate the top 5 dropped yesterday, which includes Georgia for 5-star cornerback Keely Ringo. Got 2 big guests on today's program. We'll hear from former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards, Mr. College Football himself, Tony Barnhart. Jeff Sentell is still included in all of this, and I'll tell you kind of how that's going to work out in just a moment. So I hope you got some time because we're going to be here for a while. Sit back, relax. Last day for us before a week off. We are going to talk a lot of Georgia football as DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is presented by Kroger. More ways to save fresh food, low prices at Kroger.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
There is something on today's show a little later on that I'm really excited about, a special message from Georgia running back Nick Chubb to DawgNation. This is actually going to be really cool. We'll do this coming up in just a little bit. I'll tell you the whole story on that. I've also at some point in time, now anybody who works with me or my own family will tell you, there is nobody who hates logistics more than me. I don't like small details really at all on any subject. And today I do have to do a little logistic stuff with you because I am going to be gone next week, but we do have some podcasts coming. And today's show is a little bit different because of our getaway day type thing. So I got a lot to explain about today's show and about the next couple of DawgNation Dailies coming up a little bit later on. We'll do that then. For now, let me just say, first of all, it's great to have you with us here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And I want to start with something I heard on the radio this week, and I thought this was really cool. Former Georgia coach Mark Richt was a guest on The Front Row, which is a morning show on Atlanta sports radio station 680 The Fan, and it's a wide-ranging conversation. You can go to their website. I'll make sure I put a link to this when I post the show notes, our podcast at the world-famous DawgNation.com. You can listen to the full interview yourself. It's kind of a wide-ranging conversation, but there was one thing in particular to me that really stood out. Now, I didn't expect Richt to say anything other than this. Obviously, Richt's a classy guy. He's going to be in a first-class manner as he speaks about Georgia coach Kirby Smart, and yet it's still really good to hear. The question comes up of, hey, what do you think of the job that Kirby Smart's doing thus far at Georgia? What do you think about the guy that followed in your footsteps there at UGA? And as you might imagine, because of the job Kirby is doing and because the man that Richt is, he had a lot of good things to say about Kirby Smart. I believe you'll enjoy this. Here is Richt from 680 The Fan.
You know, Georgia's doing great. I'm happy for Coach Smart. I've been friends with Kirby a long time, and there's a few guys on the staff that I still know, and the players that I'd recruited, most of them are on the way out, if not gone. But Catherine and I, my wife, we watch and we cheer for Georgia when they play, and it's not shocking that they're doing well. Georgia should do well. It's a great place with great tradition, and it's Kirby's doing a heck of a job running it.
So listen, I think there's a lot there from Richt. And first of all, I will admit that just hearing him speak kind of reminds me of the affection that I sort of once had for him when he was Georgia coach. And so many of you who watch and listen to us every day kind of feel the same way, that Richt was a justifiably popular figure when he was Georgia coach because of the way that he always kind of went about his business. And now, I mean, we're going on 4 years of Richt no longer being the Georgia head coach, and Kirby Smart's obviously given fans plenty of reasons to like him and appreciate the job that he's doing too. And so it's almost like, even for someone who once cast as large a shadow over the state as Richt did, there's a certain sense of out of sight, out of mind, where you almost forget, oh yeah, Richt was a good guy, is still a good guy. And I'm really glad to hear him happy about what's going on at Georgia, because one of the things I've been kind of pushing for is, and I don't really know what this means or how this happens, but as Kirby goes through his Georgia career and likely builds a lot of success, he's already been to the college football playoff, he's on the doorstep of maybe winning a national championship, because his accomplishments in the years to come could be so significant, it would be at least possible to kind of forget about some of the things that Richt did. And I hope by Richt saying, hey, I'm still proud of Kirby Smart, I'm still rooting for him, I hope it makes it easier to kind of bridge the gap from the Kirby years to the Richt years, because I do think that the Richt years, I'm not saying that Kirby has won with Richt's players, that's oversimplifying this, and yet, as Richt pointed out, that he has had recruits in this program for the last 3 years under Kirby Smart. For the most part, we're kind of cycling out of most of those guys. It's too simplistic to say that Kirby's won with Richt's recruits, but it's certainly fair to say that Kirby hasn't won yet without any Mark Richt recruits, and I think that's an important thing to consider, that Mark Richt didn't exactly leave the cupboard bare for Kirby Smart in his first couple years in this program, and some of the success that Kirby has had has at least been aided by the steward of the program that Richt was before Kirby Smart got there. That's at least important to remember. But for those of us, and I'm 42, and I hear from a lot of people, from time to time who are kind of my same age, and they kind of look back on those early Richt years the same way that I did. If you're too young to remember this, or too young to have been going to these games, it is really hard to kind of put into words how big of a deal it was for Georgia to win the SEC championship game in 2002. Now, a lot of people will say, well, it shouldn't have been that big a deal. This is Georgia, and Georgia ought to be winning and dominating and blah, blah, blah. And to a certain extent, that's probably true, and yet the reality was that had not kind of been the case. And in 2002, Georgia broke a 20-year drought to win the SEC, get to the SEC championship for the first time after a decade of other teams like Tennessee and Florida representing the East there in that game. It was a gigantic, monumental deal. And even when Kirby Smart eventually goes on to win a national championship, and I do believe that's what he's going to do, I'm going to tell you something. That 2002 season for me as a fan is still going to have a big old piece of my heart, a big old place in my memory banks of what Georgia football once was and the fun that I had as kind of a young guy. Just enough money to go to the games, not so much responsibility that I couldn't, find my way to every place that George was playing. Those were just good times. And I got a lot of affection there for Richt. And just hearing him talk about Kirby, to me, makes it a lot easier to remember that Richt era and say, the Kirby Smart era may be great. The Richt era is pretty good, too. And all Georgia history is worth remembering. And the Richt history is kind of worth remembering here just a little bit as well. And it's also just kind of nice to hear Kirby Smart say, yes, or I should say Mark Richt say, yes, the foundation at Georgia exists. The resources exist that Georgia ought to be doing well, and yet the job that Kirby Smart is doing, even with those resources, is still a commendable one. I just really like hearing that from Mark Richt. It was from 680 The Fan, the morning show. You can check that out yourself. I'll put a link to it at DawgNation.com, but I wanted you to hear that as part of DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger here today. Now, one more thing from Richt in this interview, and I guess at this point in time, is there anybody else now after this that has not weighed in on Georgia, Florida, and Jacksonville in the last 2 weeks? I think Richt is the last person to be heard from on this, but he also has his thoughts on this rivalry game that's such a big deal to those of us here in our studio each and every day, and to so many of you as well. We've had our say and our piece about whether or not the game should be played in Jacksonville. There's some movement to suggest that maybe the folks who want to leave there got a little momentum on their side. Richt said, leaving Jacksonville was something he wanted to do almost from the beginning of his Georgia career. Here is more of him on what has been a hot topic thus far this summer.
When I first got there, I didn't like it either, and I wanted to, to me, it wasn't neutral site.
Right.
I was like, hey, let's have a neutral site in Jacksonville, and then let's have a neutral site in Atlanta.
Right.
Okay, let's take turns doing that. In lieu of the fairness of it. And I thought even if you're in Florida and you're playing in a hot game, you're used to the heat. You might be at Georgia, 15 degrees difference in practice, and then you're going to a hotter atmosphere. There were some things I didn't like about it, to be honest with you. I understand the tradition of the game, and after a while, I just quit talking about it because I knew it wasn't going to change.
So I think that's really interesting stuff from Richt. A couple things here. First of all, Richt was the first one that I know of that ever suggested maybe the rotation not just be Jacksonville, but also include Atlanta as well. When we talked to Georgia Athletic Director Greg McGarity last week, he said that's the one idea that he's not sure has much legs, that the game's not going to be in Jacksonville. McGarity said the game ought to be on campus, and with due respect to Richt, I more agree with McGarity's statement on that. Either play it every year in Jacksonville or play it every other year in Athens, with the other game potentially being in Gainesville. I think that's the better overall decision there, but it's interesting to hear Richt kind of weigh in on that. The other slight point I will get to is it's kind of funny how this opinion has evolved over time. Richt, when he first brought this up, kind of brought it up as a potential disadvantage for Georgia always playing every year in the state of Florida. Some Georgia fans think that's still true today. But for the most part, the push that goes on for potentially leaving Jacksonville for the Georgia-Florida game is not related anymore to the on-field conditions and the challenge of Georgia always playing in the Sunshine State. As Kirby Smart has articulated, this is more about the lost opportunity to host recruits every other year. So Kirby's argument seemingly has nothing to do with the game itself. It's how the game on your campus impacts future recruiting classes, and that's at least worth pointing out. But for now, though, it's just kind of nice to hear from Richt. Nice to hear him happy for the success that Kirby Smart is having. And great news for those of us who are, I think, somewhat students of Georgia football history who want to be able to appreciate both coaches. Richt's words there make that a lot easier to do. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We are presented today by Kroger, and glad to have you with us live on video. 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, radio at noon, of course, and Athens Sports Radio 960 The Rep. And we are available as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. We're just really glad to have you as a part of our program today. And by the way, speaking of our friends at Kroger, make sure this summer, all summer long, you get grilling with fresh flavors. Your local Kroger's got everything you need, whether it's those barbecue ribs or the chips, the sides you got to put together with that. I know a lot of you enjoy cooking out on the summer, throwing some stuff on the grill, being out there on the back deck. The place to get stocked up for all that is with our friends at Kroger. We're happy to have them sponsoring DawgNation Daily here today. In just a few minutes, I'm going to go around the doghouse presented by Merriweather and Tharp and talk about Keely Ringo. Let me take care of a couple pieces of business before we get there. I had a great afternoon yesterday. I've told y'all before, we've been kind of busy lately where we've had to kind of get off the air a little earlier and not stay as much time with our comments just because we've had so much going on around DawgNation World Headquarters. I had a chance to sneak over yesterday to Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa in beautiful Towns County, Georgia, as a way of kind of a pre-planning meeting, site check type meeting for our upcoming DawgNation Days of Summer. Y'all, when I tell you that Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa is in pristine condition right now, and it is all set to welcome DawgNation in. We've got a lot of announcements coming in the weeks ahead about why this one's going to be so much fun. But please, go ahead and mark your calendars for Thursday, August 1st, and actually do more than that. Go to DawgNation.com, click on the tab for DawgNation Days of Summer, and get yourself one of these VIP room experiences before they are gone. We are about to, when I get back from vacation after the following week, we're about to just start unveiling all kinds of fun and surprises for DawgNation Days of Summer, partially why it's going to be just as good as our previous one, and some of the things about this one that are actually going to be a little bit different and unique to Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa. We will tell you all about that coming up in the days ahead, but don't wait, because if you do, the rooms may be gone. Please check out the tab at DawgNation.com, and I can't wait to see you at Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa coming up on Thursday, August 1st. That is going to be a great, great time. Now, let me take also just a quick minute here to kind of get you up to date on the schedule for today's program and then the next couple of days heading into my vacation week. This is kind of a getaway day for me, so a lot of the stuff we've been trying to get done, people we've been trying to have on the show, sometimes that kind of all falls on kind of like the last day before you're gone, so we're busy today. I've been wanting to catch up with former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards to get his thoughts with the current receiver situation at Georgia. Terrence has got some strong statements to make about that. He's going to do those on our show a little bit later on today. I'm really happy about welcoming Terrence Edwards onto the program. I love preseason predictions. I love this time of year to let smart people tell us what they think may happen with the football team this year, both UGA and the rest of the SEC. Our buddy Mr. College Football himself, Tony Barnhart from the SEC Network and so many other outlets, he's going to be with us on the program here today to do a lot of that kind of stuff too. I'm really excited about having Tony as a part of today's show. And many of you are going to say, well, what about Jeff Sentell? I want my recruiting fix. Guess what, y'all? We've got Jeff Sentell today as well. Now, let me give you a quick note on how this is going to happen. If you're watching on video, Jeff is going to be with us about a half an hour from right now. So we got a lot of fun content coming up. Jeff live on video coming up around 11 a.m. Eastern time. Now, if you're a regular podcast listener, you're going to have one of two ways to listen to Jeff Sentell. I'm going to distribute that at DawgNation.com Monday and Tuesday of next week. So if you will get the podcast on the website, you'll be able to get it there. If you can't wait until Monday or Tuesday to hear this, when I post the show today, I'll also put a link to the Monday and Tuesday shows. We are podcast only for 2 days next week, Monday and Tuesday. No video shows all next week while I'm on vacation. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. That's kind of the way things are going to go. And if you missed any part of this, I'll try to explain it more clearly in print when I post the show at DawgNation.com a little bit later on today. For now, though, as I said, let's go around the doghouse, presented by Meriwether and Tharp today. My good friends over there, and I know they're big dog fans. They were happy about the news yesterday. Not unexpected, but now official. When five-star cornerback Keely Ringo dropped his top 5, kind of a cool edit here. Georgia is among these schools, along with Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas. Now, there has been some chatter for a while that maybe it's a Georgia-Texas type one versus one battle here for Ringo. I don't know for sure, how true that is. I'll let Jeff Sentell give us more of the expertise on that when he joins us, when he's a part of the program a little bit later on. But I do know this. Everything you continue to hear about Ringo, given his size, given the speed that he showed off at the recruiting event in Atlanta this week, given all that kind of stuff, this is one of the biggest recruitments you could possibly have for Georgia in this class, because the big receivers at places like Clemson, Alabama, they are not going out of style anytime soon. So Georgia finds itself where it always expected to be, in that top 5 for Ringo, and now it's going to begin to do that work of also whittling that down to the top 1 as well. Georgia's been great with defensive backs. We talked about that yesterday. Has Ringo noticed that? A lot of evidence to suggest that he has. I cannot wait to see where this one goes. But Georgia in that top 5 for now. It's Around the Doghouse. It's presented by Meriwether and Tharp. And listen, the divorce process can be scary and confusing. We all know that. You've got questions not just about your own future, but your family's future as well. Can things be put together? Can things be made whole again? Well, you may be only going through this for the first time, but Meriwether and Tharp's been through this thousands of times. And the chaos that comes along with this process, they are experts at helping you navigate your way through it. The good news is you can and you will feel normal again, but you need an advocate on your side. That's what Meriwether and Tharp provides the opportunity to do. Make sure you reach out to them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's theatlantadivorceteam.com. Check that out, Meriwether and Tharp here on Around the Doghouse. All right, it's DawgNation Daily, presented today by Kroger. It's Terrence Edwards later on, as promised. Hope you enjoy Mr. College Football himself, Tony Barnhart, right now. Boy, it is fun to have Tony Barnhart back on DawgNation Daily. Been a little while at least, a couple months maybe, since we've had Tony on the program, and it's good to have him here back today. Tony, I hope you've been enjoying your summer, and I know you're like so many of us, counting down those days to the start of the season, and you may be like me on this. It's around this time of year where I kind of feel like that countdown starts to feel a lot closer. Florida playing Miami in the middle of the summer, I guess, kind of helps with that just a little bit, but I'm starting to feel like this season's not so far away anymore. Would you agree with that?
I would, Brandon. Every year it happens the same at our house. I live in a little community called Dunwoody in Atlanta, and we have our own 4th of July parade, and my wife and I go watch it every year and enjoy it, and about the end of the parade, she turns to me and goes, "Summer's over, right?" I said, "That's right." Because July 5th, we start getting ready for SEC Media Days, which is on the 15th, and so, yeah, it will be, as the old song says, that the days are dwindling down to a precious few. So.
That's exactly right. Well, I've got a lot I want to talk to you about on today's show, and a lot of that centers around what's actually going to happen on the field for Georgia this season and its SEC brethren as well. Before we get to that, though, I joked about this before you came on. It's been a little bit of a hot topic, more than a little bit of a hot topic, the future of Georgia, Florida, and Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to at least get your thoughts on this, because I know that in addition to being, a very serious journalist yourself, you have a lot of friends who really, really love this trip to Jacksonville and, have treated this as somewhat of a sacred getaway. A lot of folks kind of feel that way, this special, unique place that it has on the college football calendar. I talked to Greg McGarity last week, though. He said about half of Georgia fans don't want the game at Jacksonville anymore, and he acknowledged that Kirby Smart truly does not want to play the game in Jacksonville either. Can the cocktail party survive if 50% of the constituents plus the head coach don't want the game there anymore?
It can survive, but it certainly makes for a lively conversation. And because I think this is a generational type thing. I think the Georgia people of my generation, this has been a big part of their lives, going down there and playing the same golf courses and eating the same restaurants and going to the beach. And the guys I've been going with, they've done it like 37 years in a row. I haven't been able to do it every year because of work commitments. But it's going to be an interesting discussion. My belief is My belief is that it's going to survive. It's going to survive in Jacksonville because at the end of the day, people are going to look at it and say, do we want to give up this much tradition for one more recruiting day? And depending on, a lot of people don't feel that way. And to me, it's going to be an interesting topic. And it's funny how it always comes up when we get down to the second or third year before the new contract comes along.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point there. As far as Georgia on the field, as you know, the big news, it's a week old now, but it's not gotten any smaller in terms of how it impacts Georgia. That's the dismissal of Jeremiah Holloman. I think you and I are both going to say Kirby Smart, given the facts as we understand them currently, really had no choice but to do what he did with Holloman, and now we'll see kind of where his life and career goes from here and kind of how Georgia steps in to replace him as a receiver, because after all, this is still a football show, and this is still going to be kind of a football story. And, Tony, kind of what I said is it is not impossible to replace Holloman and still, have production at the wide receiver position, even after having lost McCole Hardman and Riley Ridley and the other receiving targets that Fromm lost on last year's team. It's not impossible to do this, and yet it's not insignificant either. Georgia finds themselves essentially the least experienced team at receiver of all the national championship contenders, and I'm guessing if you went back and looked years and years into the past, you're going to see Georgia as a pretty significant outlier in terms of how little it brings back as in the way of targets for Jake Fromm. What's your overall perspective on how hard or how manageable this problem might be for Georgia?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, if there's one position on the football team where you can afford to play young guys, young talented guys, it's wide receiver. You can manage that. And go back and look at Alabama the last 3 or 4 years. Look at how many true freshman wide receivers they have played. Guys like Jerry Jeudy. So it can absolutely be done. And we forget, Holloman, did finish well last year, but he only caught 24 balls. It's not like you're losing a guy who caught 70 balls. So keep that in mind. And Georgia's recruited well enough, and they're bringing in the kid from Miami. Mm-hmm. And Demetrius Robertson is a guy that I think a lot of people are sort of waiting to step up and be the player everybody thought he could be. So the thing with Holloman does not change my overall perspective to Georgia. It's just somebody else is going to have to play.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, because I think experience at the receiver position matters, but in a weird way, it's almost like its own gumbo of all experience, kind of adding to the story of what Georgia is and what Georgia isn't. And while Georgia is inexperienced receiver, it's actually probably more experience than some people might think on defense after losing, a key guy like DeAndre Baker a year ago. Georgia actually brings back a good bit of production on defense, and in these early season games, Notre Dame included, Notre Dame's probably less experienced overall than Georgia is. Georgia actually does have a little bit of a ramp-up time on its schedule before it gets to the games in which the opponent really does bring back more from a year ago. Tennessee is an example of this. Florida is an example of this. Georgia doesn't see those teams until October or later, so from a schedule standpoint, it actually helps get these young receivers ready to go because you got a little bit of a step up before you get to the games that probably matter the most.
Well, and the key, of course, is that they're talented. Okay, we're talking about people with real talent, and you've got a veteran quarterback in Jake Fromm, and that's only going to help those guys a lot. So again, people were calling me last week when Holloman was let go, and I was just telling them, I said, guys, first of all, you don't want to lose the player who's shown he can be productive. Don't get me wrong, but the fact of the matter is, if there's any position you can afford to do it, it's wide receiver.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And then, Tony, the other thing is, it's kind of funny, we're several minutes in this conversation. We haven't really brought up the name Jake Fromm. And, this is one of those years where Fromm does have more experience than Trevor Lawrence, although when Lawrence has played, he's been spectacular. Fromm has a little bit more experience than Tua Tagovailoa, although he's also shown some spectacular moments. This is one of those years where Fromm's experience, if you're a Georgia fan, you hope that becomes something he can really use to his edge and his advantage. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, experience hasn't always mattered for quarterbacks in the college football playoff. We've seen inexperienced quarterbacks play well there, but the fact that Fromm is going into his third year, the fact that he's taken a lot of snaps for Georgia in an offense that'll at least be similar to what James Coley's going to do this year, the other big hope here, I think, for Georgia is the place where Georgia has kind of the most experience at the quarterback position. It just so happens that's also the most important position in the sport.
Yeah, exactly. And he's got a veteran offensive line, one of the better offensive lines Georgia's had in a long time. Certainly great depth at running back. And so I think the offense is going to be really, really good, and Fromm has shown that he doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes, and I think that's extremely important. Now everybody's got a book on Trevor Lawrence now. I've talked to some people who said that there are certain things you can do to pressure him. So, Trevor Lawrence was great, don't get me wrong, but I think the second time around is always interesting because people have a book on him of what you can do.
I've had some national writers on the show this summer, and really a few of them have kind of said something close to the same thing, admitting that the sport can be a little boring when everybody's making the same predictions, and because of the way that certain teams have marshaled all the resources, it's getting a little harder to make a surprise prediction anywhere, maybe the SEC included. Almost everyone's going to pick Alabama to win the West. Almost everyone will pick Georgia to win the East. How likely, how possible do you have an identity of a potential surprise in the SEC? Is there something that could happen in this league this year that you and me and those who are paying close attention to this stuff that we wouldn't necessarily think all that possible in late June moving towards July? Is a surprise still possible in the SEC right now?
The most intriguing storyline to me is outside the obvious is LSU, because they say they have made the commitment to opening up the passing game by bringing Joe Brady in from the New Orleans Saints. They have a lot of confidence in their quarterback, Joe Burrow. They've always had, they're always deep. They've always been talented. That's never been an issue. And I think Ed Orgeron learned a lot about being a head coach last year. Now, they go to Texas on September 7th, and we're going to learn a whole lot. But I think if they do open up the passing game, they are talented everywhere else. And it will be interesting to see how they if they can challenge Alabama. But circle September 7th when they go to Texas. That's when we're going to learn about them.
Yeah, Tony, I think that's a lot of fun to start thinking about. And it's always great to be able to talk about this kind of stuff with you at DawgNation Daily. I know you got a lot of summer content out there rolling in at the start of the season. For people who want to find you online, what's the best way to get in touch with the work that you're doing and your thoughts on the upcoming season?
Well, we were three of us and four of us in business together in a website called TMG. That stands for the Media Guides, tmgcollegesports.com/Maven, M-A-V-E-N. And we're not doing a ton of stuff right now, but we are going to crank it up around just before SEC Media Days. And we'll be there on a regular basis and looking forward to it.
Can't wait to read that stuff, Tony, and hope to get a chance to talk to you again soon. Thank you so much for being on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger here today.
All right, Brandon, take care.
Good stuff.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So I think that Tony's point on LSU is a really interesting one. And, Tony was on the show several months ago, and he said something at the time that kind of had the reverberations of a hot take, although I think it was a lot more reasoned than that, and there's a lot more evidence to support it. And I hope I'm not putting words in Tony's mouth. I think he's the one that said this. That basically Alabama's path in the SEC West is slightly more difficult than Georgia's in the SEC East, because if you look side by side, what you think of as the number 2 team in the West, LSU, and what you think of as the number 2 team in the SEC East, Florida, for me personally, I don't think there's any doubt that LSU, to me, is the more solid, more dangerous team there. And I do think the closer we get to the start of the season, the more I think that LSU holds a lot of cards for this upcoming year. Now, for what it's worth, not everybody is as high on LSU this year as I am. I know even Connor Riley, when he's a part of the R.S. Andrews cool down at the end of the show, he's been a little skeptical of LSU. I saw the other day our buddy Barrett Slee from CBS Sports. He talked about taking the under with 10 wins when it comes to LSU. I'm not buying into that, y'all. I'm not buying into that at all. I'm not telling you that Joe Burrow's going to be a spectacular quarterback. I think he's a better quarterback at this stage of his career than LSU's had in quite some time, maybe even going back to Zach Mettenberger back in, 2013. I think LSU's a pretty interesting team, and this pains me to say it, but I believe it's true. I think John Emery Jr., the running back that Georgia kind of missed out on when he flipped from Georgia to LSU, I think he may be a household name in SEC country here this season. I think that he and Ty Davis both are two very impressive freshman running backs. I think LSU's going to lean on them, and I think that LSU's got more defensive talent even after losing Devin White, after losing Greedy Williams. It's still a pretty talented defense. I think that LSU is potentially a national contender, which would give the SEC West at least 2 of those. that becomes a really interesting division. If you're looking for the possibility of a surprise in this league, I think a school like LSU certainly is an example of how that could, maybe go down. The other thing I thought that Tony said that was interesting is going back to the Georgia-Florida deal, and yes, I know we've talked about this a lot, but kind of a final thought on that, at least for today's show. Tony used the word generational to kind of describe the divide between the fans who want to keep it in Jacksonville and the fans that don't. I think largely that's true. Now, that's not universally true because there are some young fans who enjoy the cocktail party too. Frat Beach is probably the perfect example of that. But I think that Tony overall is right. For the people who've been doing this for a long time, it just means more to you than if you've only been one or two times in your life because you're just now old enough to start going on your own. I think that's probably true. For a lot of people, they've done this for a long time, and there's some more entrenched feeling about it when you've done it that much. It's SEC through time. Before we kind of get too deep into all of this, too, can I show you this quick picture? When we had DawgNation Days of Summer, our kickoff event at Callaway Resort and Gardens back earlier in June, one of the things we were able to do y'all remember these cornhole boards that we were talking about on the show for a while, where you could go and you could order yours and Nick Chubb was going to sign it and personalize it for you? We thought we'd turn the tables on Chubb. We said, we're going to not only accept your signed and personalized cornhole boards, how about we sign and personalize a cornhole board set for you? And everybody who came to DawgNation Days of Summer at Callaway Resort and Gardens signed a set of boards that we gave to Chubb. If you're watching on video right now, how about this picture of Chubb with these cornhole boards? And a big thank you from Chubb back to DawgNation for those. I'm going to tell you something right now. On a Friday before I go on vacation, there isn't much that can make me much happier than seeing Nick Chubb posing and smiling with the cornhole boards that we were able to deliver to him. What a really, really fun thing. Just awesome stuff, and so glad we were able to share that with Chubb. If you're normally a podcast listener or a radio show listener, check out the video today if you don't mind, just so you can get a chance to see that picture. I was really proud. I'm really proud of that. I think that's a really cool thing. We're almost done with our SEC through. Let me just say, one of the things I was going to talk about here, Bill Connolly, the recent hire to ESPN from SB Nation, has a really good piece kind of looking at some what-if scenarios for college football playoff contenders. Honestly, I don't have a ton of time to break all this down right now. Let me just push this back. We'll probably end up talking more about this a bit later on, but that's kind of a fun thing. So we'll get ready to wrap up our SEC through here. We do have Jeff Sentell coming up live on video in just a couple of minutes. We will also have him on podcast that we'll make available to everybody as well. But I know a lot of you want to hear from former Georgia wide receiver on the situation with the Dogs at wide receiver. Let's get ready to talk to Terrence Edwards right now. And we will do that coming up in just a moment. Terrence Edwards, the great former Georgia wide receiver, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. I cannot wait to be able to do that. That is going to be a lot of fun today, so we are looking forward to getting rolling and getting rocking and rolling with that. We'll do that with Edwards here coming up in just a moment. In fact, Terrence is with us right now, so let me say hello to him today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Terrence, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for being with us, and we hope you're enjoying your summer, getting a chance. I know you've been busy working with these receivers, as you do all the time, but hopefully in between that you've had a chance to be by a pool or enjoy a little summertime fun. You're not working the whole time.
No, I haven't had an opportunity yet to get out and enjoy myself, but in the next week or so I definitely will get out on vacation with my family and my kids.
Because that's what people don't realize, Terrence, right? And you and I talked on the phone the other day, and you had just gotten off the football field. You'd been doing some training and some coaching. For the guys that are, receivers for Georgia or that next generation of NFL receiver, this is that time of the year where media guys like me aren't paying attention. The average fan doesn't get to see. But the work of catching all those balls on those Saturdays, it's done right now, right? Getting that footwork done, getting those hands shored up, getting chemistry with the quarterback in some cases. But, the work of being a good receiver happens right now when the rest of the world's slathered in sunscreen and dipping their toes in the water. That's when receivers are going to work, right?
Exactly. Right now, it's kind of one of the biggest college athlete and a football player. It's this summer and the summer heat, getting your just crafting, trying to be the best player that you could be, and this is the best time. It's hot right now. We really don't want to do it, but to be the best player, this is the perfect time to be the best player you could be.
Well, listen, I know that so many of the guys who've had a chance to work with you are grateful that you're putting your time in with them, and there's nothing that we like more than knowing these former Georgia guys are still taking care for the next generation of football player, not just Georgia guys, but guys that are just trying to further their dream of playing football at a lot of levels and a lot of different schools. I think it's really cool that you're a part of that, and I want to transition, if you don't mind, to a more serious subject just for a moment. Obviously, you're aware of the news that J.J. Holloman was dismissed from the Georgia team this past week, and Terrence, there are really two prongs to this story, right? There's the issue of how does Georgia respond to this on the field, but there's also the issue of, how does Holloman learn from this, grow from this, get the help that he needs to make sure that in the same situation next time he doesn't make as bad a decision as this turned out to have allegedly been for him in this situation based on the facts as they've been presented in news accounts thus far. I mean, what are your thoughts on JJ as a person here and how he moves on and does better after this allegation against him last week? What are your thoughts on that?
First and foremost, we must say that we don't condone allegedly what he done to your young lady. That is a horrible transgression that JJ made. It's just horrible, and I think any punishment that came his way, he deserved if the allegations are true, and most likely they are because he admitted to them. So that is the first and foremost. And my biggest issue in this whole thing is this is not about football anymore. This is about two young people in a situation that is not good for either party. And I feel bad for the young lady, and I also feel bad for JJ because I know him personally. I know his family personally. And JJ is a good kid that made a horrible mistake. And I just hope he can get his life together, and I know he will. I'm very confident that him, his mom, and his family would get past this, and JJ can live the rest of his life and not have people make this. This is a one-time, in my opinion, this is a one-time isolated incident. And I don't want JJ for his character to be assassinated off this one-time incident. Bad incident that it is, but I just don't want people to assassinate his character.
I don't want to make you in a position where you have to reveal any private conversations, but have you had a chance to speak to the Holloman family? Can you give us any details on how they're feeling right now and how they're going through this challenging time?
I haven't. I'm pretty sure they probably seen what I put out on social media about it because, he's a really good kid, and his mom is a really good lady that loves Georgia football and loves everyone that is involved. So I haven't had a chance to reach out. I will at some point, but right now I'm just going to let them work this situation out with their family.
I know it's not easy to transition to the football part of this, and for Holloman, as you said, this is beyond a football story. This is about how he, gets the help that he might need to move on from a decision he's going to regret in some form or fashion for the rest of his life if these allegations against him are true. And yet there is a curiosity from Georgia fans about how the team does replace him because Holloman was a big-time receiver. He was the leading returning receiver on this team a year ago. In happier interviews on more fun subjects, you and I have talked in the past a lot about Dominic Blaylock and George Pickens and, guys on this roster that you've worked closely with and trained before. Do you have some opinions starting to formulate on what you think the wide receiver core is going to look like for Georgia now?
I just think that room is just too talented. Yes, we will miss JJ. He's the most experienced receiver that we have, but Lawrence Cager now transfer is big. I mean, now he's a guy that has played a lot of football, and I would say right now, he's probably going to get one of the first cracks at replacing JJ. But I'm not going to write off the other guys that we have recruited and we thought was pretty good football players to offer a scholarship for us. Trey Blunt is another guy that comes to mind that I've worked with closely. Tyler Simmons just going to have to expand his game and take it to another level. We have Dominic Blaylock. We have Kerry Jackson. We have a lot of guys in that room. Yes, they're inexperienced, but they're very talented. So once they get an opportunity, I think those guys are going to show people of why we recruited them and why people thought they was highly recruited athletes because they just haven't had the opportunity to showcase their talent. Now, someone has to step up and prove that they're rankings wasn't a joke. And I think we got a lot of guys that could step up in that position that JJ has left.
So let me try to ask you kind of an overarching question about this. As you said before, Trey Blunt's a guy that played a lot in 2017, probably less so in 2018. Demetrius Roberts was on the roster a year ago. He's looking to break out. Blaylock, Pickens, freshman coming in. As a guy who did perform at the highest level when it comes to the receiver position, what would you tell those guys in terms of the one thing they need to be doing now or the one thing they need to be doing when summer practice begins in a few weeks? If they want to earn the respect of Cortez Hankton, the receivers coach, if they want to get the attention of Kirby Smart, be on the field and be targeted during games, what matters most right now in that step these guys hope to take to be able to do that?
First, they have to trust. They have to trust that they're going to be accountable. That is the biggest thing. Accountable goes in a lot of shapes, form, and fashion. That's taking care of your body, being where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there, on and off the field, and then just being accountable to your teammates. The second thing is now you just got to go and show out and be consistent. That's as a receiver, you want to be consistent in the run game and the pass game. So if these guys can go out and show Coach Hankton, Coach Cooler, and Coach Kirby, Coach Smart that they can be consistent catching the football, they can be consistent blocking, they can be consistent. Knowing the playbook to the level that the coaches want them to be. Then we can go out and then they can play fast. Guys don't play fast because they're not confident in one area or the other. When they become confident in their whole ability, 100% of being a football player, that's when they play fast and that's when their talent shows.
Terrence, I think that's incredibly well said. We appreciate your time here on DawgNation Daily to share that with us. For folks who want to get more in touch with you and some of the individual coaching work you've done with receivers, how can people find out more about that kind of stuff from you?
You can reach me on all social media at TE, that's Terrence Edwards, Wide Receiver Academy on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Well, Terrence, I really appreciate you being back here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. It is always a great conversation to be able to have with you. Your insight on this position is really a valuable resource for us. Hope you enjoy your weekend, and we will look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Really good stuff there from former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards, and here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Let me also take a moment to do our Kroger kickoff, and of course, as we look ahead on the Georgia sports calendar, really the next big event in terms of the athletic event doesn't happen until August 31st when Georgia gets ready to go to work on that field there in Nashville against the Vanderbilt Commodores. That's the season opener for the Georgia Bulldogs. But the good news is, in between now and then, there are a couple of things to think about. Jeff Sentell will be a part of the opening in Frisco, Texas next week. That's a big recruiting event. No doubt some news will be coming out of that. So that'll help tide you over between now and August 31st. Then after the 4th of July week, the next week after that is SEC Media Days in Hoover, Alabama. DawgNation will have top-flight coverage of all of that, too. So August 31st may still seem like a little bit of a long ways from now, but there's a lot to do to kind of help get you ready for that. It's a Kroger kickoff here on DawgNation Daily. And by the way, speaking of Kroger, you can get 3 times the fuel points on hundreds of items throughout the store, including Kroger ice cream, bag treats for your dogs, Hershey's chocolate syrup, Red Bull, and so much more. Just make sure you look for those 3 times the fuel points tags on the aisle, and you can start saving. And let me tell you something. I'm about to fill up the gas tank, get in the car, and drive a whole bunch tomorrow. Saving some fuel money at Kroger is certainly a good thing for me, and I think it'll be a good thing for you, too. That's our Kroger kickoff here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger here today. And as we said before, it is vacation week next week. So we'll have podcasts up. If you're normally a video viewer, next week's a great time to check out the podcast. We'll have a couple of those. They'll be kind of light and loose. They'll involve Jeff Sentell. We're going to have Jeff live on video in a couple of minutes to kind of set up all of that. But it's going to be a good time. And I'm very appreciative to all of you who have allowed us to be gone next week. It's something that we are really looking forward to, and I know my family's excited about just kind of being away from it all and being at the beach, and we couldn't do that if it wasn't for the support you've shown for us. So thanks for being patient while we're not here next week, and we appreciate you allowing us to come back and talk a little Georgia football with you again the following Monday right here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. By the way, Gator Hater Updater, how about that number? 972. We'll see you a week from now, on video anyway, for DawgNation Daily. Y'all have a great day. And on video. All right, so here's what we're going to do, y'all. As we said before, this is going to be semi-complicated, but hopefully easy to follow. We're about to have Jeff live on video right now. So if you want Jeff on a Friday, you get Jeff on a Friday. We're going to do that coming up in just a moment. And I'm going to make this a part of the podcast on Monday and Tuesday. We'll still have new content on the podcast, so you're still going to want to check those out, even if you hear the full Jeff interview right now. But the Jeff interview we do now will essentially be the podcast interview the next couple of days. Does that make sense? And if you are a person that's checking in on the video, but you can't stay for the amount of time we're about to talk to Jeff, totally understand that. If you want to hear the full interview, I'm not going to make you wait till Monday to do it. You can either go back and listen to the video over again once it's over with, or I'm going to put a link to our SoundCloud page when I post the show at DawgNation.com. So the overall point is, for the people who want to get this thing on Monday or Tuesday, I'll deliver that there at DawgNation.com. If you want it sooner than that, you can listen right now, watch right now, or you can go to SoundCloud pretty much later on this afternoon and be able to knock out both of those episodes. We just wanted to have some content while we're gone, so folks don't forget about us, but also a chance to kind of be a part of the conversation that's ongoing. As you might imagine, one of the things that we'll talk a lot to Jeff about, the 5-star cornerback Keely Ringo, who dropped his top 5 yesterday, UGA included in that. We'll talk to Jeff about that and a whole lot more. Is Jeff ready to go? Oh, Jeff is ready to go. All right, without further ado, let me say hello to Jeff Sentell. And Jeff, first of all, thank you very much on this happy Friday that you accommodated us at a slightly different time. We really appreciate your time on that and hope you're doing well. Are you already in Frisco, Texas?
Sure, I'm at the Star and actually putting a note in on the DawgNation forum right now about Broderick Jones, of all folks, the forgotten 5-star a little bit in the class. But, hey, Brendan, as luck would have it, and much ado, I go into my hotel room, I look outside, there's a balcony, and it is a balcony that overlooks the outfield of the Frisco Rough Riders, the AA affiliate of the Texas Rangers. So we all like rooms with a view, and I know you'll have probably one on your vacation, but that's a neat little perk when you have minor league baseball just going outside your door on a business trip.
That is exactly right. That's kind of a fun thing to be able to see. And when you said you were at the Star, I'm assuming that means you're not actually standing on the Star right now. You're not looking up and seeing the hole in the roof, although that'd be a kind of a cool place for you to be doing DawgNation Daily. My understanding is that's not exactly precisely where you are. Is that fair to say?
No, the Star is where it's funny. A little quick backstory is that it used to be called the Nike opening, and sometimes, forgive me, folks, I even slip and call it the Nike opening a lot, just because that's the way my brain is wired for this event for so long. Nike is no longer an official sponsor. The holding company for the organization which puts together the opening in the Elite 11 is owned by Student Sports, which is a property of Jerry Jones, of all folks. So that's why it's no longer at Nike headquarters in Beaverton, Oregon, and now it's at Dallas, Texas. And these young men, there's 6 Georgia commits who will eventually be here. There's another, I think, 17 targets, of which 5 or 6 of those are red-hot targets, and they will be working out at the NFL training camp home of the Dallas Cowboys. Kind of all connected there.
So as you might imagine, I want to talk a lot about the opening in our conversation. Before we get there, let me do a couple of other things. You mentioned the Broderick Jones note in the forum, and I hope people are checking this out. I keep reminding folks to make sure they do. Is it mini intel? Is that what we're calling it in the forum at forum.dawgnation.com, where you're kind of dropping in some little nuggets in there? That's kind of become kind of a good spot to go in there and get just a little bit of a quick hit, quick fix on the UGA recruiting stuff. I think that little thread in the forum, which I know has become really popular, I think that is a really fun thing. And, Jeff, I hope people are seeing that every day.
Yeah, we just put something up. I think it was like a week ago, maybe 10 days ago, where I just decided to drop little nuggets for the forum folk only. And it's kind of like a down-low, hurry-up version where we just, I guess in Brandon's mind, it's let's just simply cut to the chase here, dispense all the pleasantries. And I'm, sharing some thoughts there about Andrew Raym right now and what's going on with that decision. It's funny. We're having a lot of fun with the Keely Ringo discussion in one of the threads, which is one of our gargantuan threads, and I say that in all matter of fact. It's the next to commit to the G 2020 thread. There are currently 5,800 comments in this thread and more than 330,000 views in that thread. So Folks, if you can find better free information out on the internet involving a deep dive and some insider slants on Georgia recruiting, all that stuff I won't even put up on the website yet. That's where you need to be.
So before we get to the Keely Ringo thing, you did pique my curiosity a moment ago when you mentioned Broderick Jones, because, I will tell you that Jones is one of those guys that I have openly wondered about, not because I think that somehow Georgia's in danger of missing out on him or anything like that. It's just that, most recruits choose to be a little noisier than Jones chooses to be. I don't hear a lot from Broderick Jones. We don't see a ton from Broderick Jones, which kind of leaves me just at times openly wondering, and almost, I hate to say it this way because he's obviously, as the people watching on video can see his highlight, he's obviously a very good player, but it's almost like he can be overlooked or forgotten because we just don't hear a ton from him. What's your current take on Jones? He's not, my understanding, going to be at the opening this week. What's your current take on him, given the fact that he's a bit more mercurial than the typical 2020 recruit or the typical modern-day recruit of any cycle?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that when I wrote the story, Brandon, and I want to put it in terms I think most folks can kind of get their arms around. Broderick Jones is kind of like the way a recruit would have acted in 1995, before social media, before tweets, before Instagram pics of jerseys, or interesting, curious little comments on Instagram threads. That's what Broderick Jones is like. He's not into the culture of tweeting and, hey, look at me and all that hype. He doesn't go to camps. I think Broderick is kind of like Clay Webb, except at least Clay Webb went on visits. And, the natural question or pushback on that is, why doesn't Broderick Jones visit? And that's really way up in the story. I think the last time he went to Georgia, he talked to his offensive line coach, and he told him he'd seen everything to Georgia. He tried on the jerseys. He'd been there a couple times, a lot of times up until that point. Because he's been committed, Brandon, for, I think, 16 months now, 15 months now. And he told his offensive line coach, he said, hey, man, I'm good. I don't want to come back here again until it's time to go play. It's kind of like me telling you, Brandon, I know all remaining 14 members, I know all remaining 14 changes to the Georgia class, which will get them up to 24 or 25 right now. But I'm not going to tell you about them until early signing day or the old school signing day. He just doesn't want to be teased. He just doesn't want to see that up there in front of him and see where his future is trending when he can't go do it. It's kind of just too much of a temptation or a flirtation, and he just don't want to deal with the anguish of going up there, loving it, getting all jazzed up and excited, and then having to wait months and months and months before he can actually be a Bulldog.
Correct my memory on this. Is he the one that had been committed for a long time and nobody knew it because he just never announced it? Was it Broderick that was kind of that in his backstory, that his UGA commitment status predated the media attention for it because he didn't really see that much of a need to announce it?
Yeah, that's exactly the way it is. It's funny. I'll never forget that. One of the more unique, strange recruiting stories I will ever cover, Brandon. And it's everybody saw Broderick Jones 6'6", 270. Now he's up to 300, Brandon, and still looks like he weighs 270. I sat down with him. I started talking, and he gave me a lot of answers that made me just kind of scratch your old head a little bit. And then I was like, hold on a second. Dude, are you committed? And he's like, yeah. and I looked at his coach, and he's like, yeah, he's committed. And then I looked at his other coach, and he's like, yeah, he's actually committed to Georgia a couple of times. We're surprised it hadn't gotten out yet. And I was like, well, has anybody that does what I do asked him, has he committed yet? They're like, no, you're the first one to ask. Everybody's asking him who's his leaders and which schools does he like and which coaches does he have the best relationship with. And it kind of just takes it all back to square one reporting for me. Maybe the first thing you should ask a lot of these kids if you ever want to get in this business is, have you committed anywhere yet? And he's like, yeah, I'm committed. I'm like, hold on a second. I need to write this up immediately. And in these days where everybody's insidered and crystal balls and stuff like that, when you operate in a vacuum, kind of like Broderick Jones does, this thing can happen. I mean, he's really like, at least Clay Webb. Like, Clay Webb would not tweet a lot. He would not go around a lot. But he would take some visits. And then after his visits, you would see him at a stadium, so you'd know he's visiting. But he's kind of like Broderick Jones. Broderick Jones is kind of like Joshua Braun. He has a Twitter account, rarely uses it. And he will take an official. That's in the story. He will take an official to Georgia for either Texas A&M or Notre Dame. But he also will take a lot of his officials. He said he does want to take his officials. He wants those trips. He wants those experiences as a recruit for him and his family. But there are a few, which I feel, rather clarifying statements about maybe the proper way to view his recruitment. Now, Auburn's really trying. They're trying to pull Broderick Jones away. I'm sure they're saying stuff like, they got 3 tackles in the class. They got another top 5 tackle. The thing with Broderick that I think will set him apart is he will be able to enroll early at Georgia in January of 2020, which makes him an even more intriguing prospect to come away and maybe help restock the shelf for Georgia at offensive tackle.
We talk about Keely Ringo here for a moment. As we're recording this on a Friday, we're just a day removed from Ringo dropping his top 5 yesterday. Georgia was on there. Everybody expected that. Texas was on there. Everybody expected that. What about the other 3? Any surprise from you about Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State? And we've kind of treated this on this show as a Georgia-Texas battle because that's what you have said, and that's what some other the whispers out there have kind of been up to this point in time. Before we get to that part of this, was there anything newsy to you about Buckeyes, Ducks, or Crimson Tide?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. First of all, it was interesting again that no USC, no UCLA, no Arizona State for him. He's got an interesting lineage. Actually, I don't know if most know this, but he's a 2-time state champion at one of the power programs in Arizona. For what that's worth, but he didn't grow up in Arizona. He actually grew up in Tacoma, Washington. He's a Saber Cat, which is a highly unique. I know you're a big fan of high school football teams and their nicknames.
Oh yeah,
you don't hear too many Saber Cats out there. It makes you think of maybe Lion-O and Panthro from our Thundercats days growing up.
I was thinking the same thing on that for sure. I was thinking the same.
Anybody that's listening in on this conversation, if they know anything about Thundara and Lion-O and Thundercats, well, that's pretty sporty. Not often we can work a Thundercats Lion-O reference into a recruiting conversation, but Ringo, I've always felt Georgia and Texas. He spent a whole week with the Texas staff in the early spring. Most people thought that he was going to wind up at Texas, and Georgia has slowly but surely started reeling this thing in with visits. And the fact that he put Georgia in his top 5 is probably something akin to somebody telling me that you're going to wear a red and black clothing item on your vacation next week. I think Georgia has been in his top 5 probably ever since January and his first really big visit when he came in for an early January junior day. He's just been that good. He's caught that much attention from Georgia and vice versa. We've had him. I know folks probably watch our Hedges program as well, and before the Hedges, we've had Keely as the guy, the 5-star receiver diffuser is what sometimes we like to call him. We've had him as the number 1 top target in the class for weeks now on Before the Hedges.
So let me ask you one more Ringo question. I'm going to ask it this way. If I go back and look at some of the stuff that Mikhail Sherman has said about Ringo on social media, that would lead a Georgia fan to, for the most part, I think, feel pretty good about Ringo's status eventually being a part of this 2020 class because of how open Sherman was with Ringo and how open he's been about a lot of things in particular. There was the kind of funny exchange back and forth with Zamir White not too long ago about the June 27th date. White's mom's birthday, that's when Zamir committed to Georgia, as Connor Riley wrote about yesterday at DawgNation, or on Thursday at DawgNation.com. And it's Ringo's birthday as well when he drops the top 5. I think that there's a lot of, for someone like me who just sort of scarfs up all the publicly available information, there's a lot of evidence that says, hey, maybe Georgia's in pretty good shape for Keely Ringo. Any reason why a Georgia fan should pay attention to the opposite of that? Or is there a growing mountain of evidence against that? Or is what's out there publicly connecting to Georgia, is that the most important thing to know about Keely at the moment?
Yeah, I would think Keely is the guy that Georgia continues to recruit the defensive back spot very well. I don't know if defensive analyst Nick Williams gets enough credit for the work he does helping to recruit Georgia guys over the last couple of years. Nick Williams played at Georgia. He's from Bainbridge. He was very instrumental in the Lewis Steen commitment to Georgia, the guy that's now dunking up a storm at Camp Sunshine of late. I think he's really huge here with Keely Ringo as well. I know you like to sift through all the comments sometimes, Brandon, everywhere on social media. You keep seeing this line come up that says, remember what was said. And it goes out from Sherman to Gilbert to Milton to Ringo to, lots of folks like Iola Gunby when he was a Georgia commitment. They had some, remember we called them, Rick Gilbert called them classified chats around G-Day. And that's just what it is. And we were having fun on the forum, Brandon. Not to go over too hard in the paint here on the forum, but I was kind of pulling a Stephen A. Smith impersonation by saying I can confirm that Keely Ringo is seriously considering the Georgia Bulldogs. That's kind of like what he said about Kawhi Leonard, seriously considering the Los Angeles Lakers of late. But Ringo, I mean, a lot of folks hear that name and they think of Johnny Ringo from Tombstone. This guy is going to be at the opening here out in Texas this weekend. He's going to run as fast as anyone. And maybe the most shocking thing to me about this top 5 he just released on his birthday, we're not in the schools involved. It wasn't even a placing of where the schools were on that really smooth edit. Looks like comic book graphic novel stuff right there. But the fact that this young man at 6'1", 205 pounds, who clocks a 10.4, 1 in the 100, is now just turning 17 years old.
Yeah, boy, that's something. This is a very, very impressive young man from a football recruit standpoint, to be sure. I want to talk about the opening and some of the stuff that is going to go down there in Frisco, Texas. Can I do one thing before we get there, though? In an earlier portion of our conversation, you referenced Andrew Raym and some stuff you're putting in the forum at forum.DawgNation.com. I get the sense, based on the discussion that you and I have had on a lot of different platforms and some of the stuff that I'm reading from Georgia fans in our comment section here, that the spotlight is really seemingly on him. I know he's kind of accelerated his timeline, going back to the piece that you wrote with him not too long ago. I guess what is next for Raym here? Because he's one of the ones that right now that, based on the reporting that you've done, he's one of the ones that sort of, I don't know. It just seems like in terms of what could be a busy July, guys like him are kind of some of those dominoes that people are kind of waiting on to fall here. So what can you tell us about Raym right now?
Well, Raym took his official visit to Michigan. That was the last one. The decision is being pondered. The information that's out there that is even on the forum is that he was expected to make his decision amongst his family sometime this weekend, and then it would be shared with the world in a subsequent span of days after that. It's funny, there's a lot of stuff here about Andrew Raym, and I just kept it very simple for our readers when I broached this topic in one of those threads. As I said, I feel this decision will be a lot like the one Kate Ratledge made. It'll be a lot like even the one Kate Mays made, where you have a hometown, shirts in the closet, pictures in the scrapbook of a certain school, and that certain school is still in the running for the decision. But at the same time, a young man just decides, I want to go, and this is eventually the way it is, to just kind of distill all this stuff, Brandon. The young man decides, this is the guy that can get me where I want to go, and this is the person that I want to sit in offensive line room meetings with, the person that I want to coach me on my journey to my dreams. And that is as simple as it is. Everybody can think about Andrew Raym and the Oklahoma kid. Well, it's not any harder than pulling Isaiah Wilson out of Brooklyn, New York, away from Michigan and Alabama, when Georgia hadn't won a stinking thing in 12 years, when Isaiah Wilson was making the moves to be a Georgia Bulldog before that announcement in mid-December. Not any harder than pulling Tate Ratledge and his daddy's license plate and his daddy's back glass sticker off that truck. Not any harder than pulling the son of a Tennessee captain away from the program, which was led by Phil Fulmer as athletic director at the time, and Kate Mays. Not any harder than any of this other stuff. I can even add Xavier Truss, a young man from Rhode Island, when every soothsayer in the world with a crystal ball predictions account said he was going to go to Penn State. Georgia fans have seen this before. They know what Sam Pittman is capable of, and Andrew Raym at the same time, folks. People forget this with all these overlaying narratives. But he was committed to Oklahoma, the dream school, and then decommitted from the dream school because he had to open things up. And every time the conversation of Andrew Raym comes up in my mind, I remember the young man telling me for the longest time there was something different about Sam Pittman. There was something different about talking to him when he didn't want to talk to really any college recruiters. They didn't talk about football. They spoke about things, life after football, life before football, things, personal things, his family. Raym is just a guy, and I remember him telling me in mid-April when he was dropping the top 5 and naming some official visits. He said Sam Pittman was the only coach he really talked to anymore. These are things that allowed Georgia to get in this race for sure.
So when I think about the opening that's about to go down, and I think I've told you this, one of the things that's probably the most exciting to me is for some of these national names that, it's just frankly hard for you to fly out and see. Now, you've been doing a lot of traveling as of late, but in terms of all the different guys that are kind of on the landscape for Georgia, it's hard to get up there and see them all. But for a lot of those uncommitted names, they're going to be in one spot this week. So for me personally, now I won't get to read all of this in the moment because I will be gone and out of town, but I am looking forward to hopefully getting a chance to hear from Darnell Washington comes to mind, who I really haven't heard from a ton lately. I'd love to hear from him. Some of these national guys that we just don't get to hear that much from, I'm kind of excited about that. What are you most looking forward to in terms of the coverage opportunities, the opening, and just from an evaluation standpoint, some of the things that you're hoping to see? To see.
Yeah, well, I mean, for a guy like me that covers Georgia now, it has totally changed from a guy that covered Georgia 3 or 4 years ago. Like, I would probably already have, platinum or onyx medallion status with Delta or A-list with Southwest if I had to go see these guys every weekend. Because Georgia, we've wrote about this, we've spoken about this, Brandon. I don't think the class is going to include any more than 7 or 8 kids from the state of Georgia. I think the other 17 or 18 will come from kids outside the state of Georgia, and it's not like SEC footprint Georgia either. 6'7.5" Darnell Washington, Kendall Milton out of California. Washington comes out of Nevada. Milton comes out of California. Ringo, the aforementioned Ringo, comes out of Arizona. Noah Sewell, man, to me, I heard he's weighed in of late at recruiting events at like 270. And yet he moves like a fullback, or he moves like a guy that's 220, 230 at inside linebacker. Sewell is a Polynesian player. Lots of players in his family are already in major college football. He was working with the running backs, Brandon, at a recruiting event, and I want to see that young man move, and I want to see how well he carries that weight, especially at an inside linebacker spot. Zachary Evans out of Houston, Texas, will be there. I mean, it's funny. Aside from like Cedric Von Tron and Jones, and then you've also got Andrew Raym, who won't be at the opening here this week either. But aside from that, you've got a lot of the big names in the college football recruiting world that will be there. Brian Brzee, everybody remembers that name. I think he's one of 9 Clemson commits that will be there. Georgia has 6. You get to see one of the hottest recruits in the country right now, which is Marcus Rosemy. Out of St. Thomas Aquinas in Fort Lauderdale. He just roasted everybody at a recent big-time camp. He will be here as well, and you'll get to see Carson Beck, the quarterback, who I think it is a crime that somehow there are 7 other quarterbacks rated higher than him right now along those 24/7 sports composite ratings, and he'll get a chance to make his move up that leaderboard as well. Maybe stake his claim, which I think he should rightfully be considered as one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the country by anyone's estimation. He'll get a chance to throw to Darnell Washington. Kendall Milton will actually be on the same 7-on-7 team with Carson Beck. So it should be a whole lot of fun getting to see a lot of these guys and see exactly what they're like under the hood, so to speak, when they get their oil checked in terms of elite competition.
Is DJ Uiagalelei there this week?
He's not here. He's the one guy that's not here. Lots of quarterbacks wondered about that one because they thought, is he trying to protect his number 1 ranking? Is he hurt? Did he just want to back off and get away from the recruiting stuff? Well, would have been a good event with all those Clemson guys there. Georgia would have had 7, had Akiola and Gumby remained in the class. They would have been the 2nd most populated school here at the opening. But when you consider names, the names of the targets I just rolled off, like Sewell, Kendall Milton, Darnell Washington, Arik Gilbert. How can we forget Arik Gilbert coming out of the state of Georgia as well? He's going to be here. It's really the who's who. It's supposed to be the who's who every year, and it's all going to take place in sweltering temperatures here at Dallas Cowboy training camp headquarters.
If Uiagalelei is turned off by the competition at Frisco in the Elite 11, then he's going to fit right in the ACC. I can promise you that. But my reason for bringing that up is because, I mean, I think there's a real chance out there, and you can kind of handicap this better than me, and I'm not just saying this because it's what I'd like or what the audience wants to hear, but Beck would have a chance to be the best quarterback here, right? Or I should say there, where you are. Beck would have a chance to be the best quarterback there, right?
Yeah, really, the guys that I think that are kind of right there with him in terms of who could be the best quarterback here, I think Bryce Young is a highly rated USC commitment there. He's a 5-star. You know, he's seen as a pro-style passer, much like Beck. You know, there are other names, Brandon. You know, you've got Theo Johnson, the Canadian tight end. He's one of the guys I'm really most interested in seeing, him in the now 40-inch vertical leap. Jacoby Cowan is here. Potential Miami flip running back Don Chaney Jr. is here. The safety everybody talks about in Miami. Out of Miami, but Oregon commitment Avante Williams. Marshawn Lloyd, another guy that Georgia fans know all about for the running back pecking order for so long. He's going to be here as well. I mean, there's just a lot of guys to consider. But with Carson Beck, Harrison Bailey is going to be here. You know, Bryce Young is going to be here. I think if you had to look at there were sportsbook or wagering betting odds for such a thing. There are 13 of the nation's top 25 quarterbacks here. Most of them are committed out already, but that number does include 7 of the top 10. I would put Beck's chances of winning this whole shooting match right up there with anybody.
Jeff, I really appreciate your time here. I know that you came on the show later than normal. You accommodated us, and you're on the road, and the fact that you give us so much time from the hotel there is a really generous thing. For the folks, whenever they hear that, be it Friday, Monday, or Tuesday, when they catch up and hear this, how can folks follow everything that's going on with you in Frisco, Texas at the Star for the opening?
So, you know, you got me on Twitter at Jeff Sentell. I'm going to put a lot of pictures from what I take. I'm also dabbling still photography while I'm trying to report all these stories and write all these words. Got Instagram at Jeff Sentell, but I'm gonna have an IV of information going into the forum, especially the down low intel thread that's on the forum thread. I'll be kind of keeping it real with everybody in there. And one thing, all you family guys out there, all you family ladies out there, if you can offer me this small window of your time during the weekend leading up. I know it's a lot of family stuff, a lot of beach stuff, a lot of travel. Give me 2 times a day where you'll check in on DawgNation and hopefully read something about some of these guys, because there's going to be a lot to cover and a lot of guys to get to. And one thing that I promised on Hedges, and I will make good on my promises. Anybody remembers the old school before the Hedges, where it was just Jeff, a step and repeat, and his cell phone mounted on the tripod? We're going to do some old school,
nice.
I won't call them fireside chats, but I'll call them outfield side chats from the balcony here when you can overlook it and maybe see minor league AA baseball going on at the same time. We'll do some of that like we did back in the old days and go a little DawgNation old school, just kind of recapping the events of the day from each week at the night of the opening. Today is a closed session for the media. They just let us know that when we arrived there. Today's a closed session, but Carson Beck and everybody will get things going today. There will be media opportunities and viewing Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way through the 3rd. There will be 3 days of the opening, and it looks like 3.5 days of the Elite 11 before that. So should be a very good time checking up and giving you guys whatever you want to know about all these top players.
I know, Jeff. People are going to love that. Thank you so much for your coverage. I look forward to catching up with you a week from now when I'm back in town once again. So safe travels to you in Texas. I look forward to seeing you soon.
All right, guys. Have a great week. Stay safe.
So really good stuff there from Jeff Sentell, and really glad to be able to catch up with him on that. And for those of you who've stuck with us through the entire time, yeah, we still got a few people still watching, so appreciate that. Thanks for being here. Why don't we do this? I know Connor's running around doing 1,000 things. Let's do a little bit of an R.S. Andrews cool down. Let's chat with folks. We're only going to do this for a couple minutes, though, because we got a lot going on here, but I do want to make sure we do all that. By the way, Green Soldier checking in on the program today. Something really cool yesterday. I had a chance, and Connor, you don't know this. I met the Green Soldier's daddy yesterday. I happened to be out and about, and he was nice enough to come over and say hello to me, and I got a chance to talk to Mr. Green, and what a great opportunity that was. So the Green Soldier checking in today, really fun for me to get a chance to talk about him yesterday with his father, who I was lucky enough to be able to talk to for a little bit. That was really, really fun. So it was good to be able to do that. So that was a really nice thing to be able to do. So great to meet Mr. Green yesterday, and we talked about the Green Soldier, and that was great. Crystal Christie says, having a great vacation. Thank you, Crystal. I'm looking forward to that. Really excited for that. Appreciate that. Let me see what else is going on over here on Facebook here just for a moment. James Bryant said, 250 of us stayed. We all deserve free Kroger food cards, right? Listen, you never know what DawgNation may be providing. We appreciate y'all being with us on a Friday. This was about as loaded a show as we've done. I don't know if we've done 3 guests in the same show. We may have done this 1 or 2 times before. We have not done that frequently. This is a lot going on today.
On DawgNation Daily, I think this is a first. I mean, we've had, interviews with post-game shows and things like that, but as far as long interviews, getting people on the phone, I think this is a record.
Sean Thomas says, will Matt Landers step up, BA? I think that the problem for Landers is not whether or not he steps up. I think the problem for Landers is the number of people in front of him. I'm a golf fan, and sometimes it's not how many shots you are back, it's how many golfers you're trailing, because the chances of somebody in front of you just getting really, really hot, that's my issue with Landers. My prediction right now is that Landers won't be one of Georgia's top 4 receivers. For me, that's not a slight against Landers as much as it is a statement that the competition in front of him right now, I just think is really stout. So I'm gonna rank Landers lower than top 4. And as I said before, that's really just kind of more about what the competition in front of him is. Connor, do you have Landers in your top 4?
I do not. I would say my new top 4 with Holloman out of the picture is in this order. I will go Blaylock, Simmons, Pickens, Cager.
So you're saying Blaylock for number of receiving yards for Georgia this year?
Yes.
Now, my understanding is, though, based on Kirby's comments, they're going to put him at the slot receiver position. It's going to be harder to lead the team in receiving from that spot.
Sure.
So you still think it's going to happen, though?
Look, bold predictions are hot.
No, that's fine.
Not everyone can make them.
Dante Edey mentions Trey Blount. And you notice Terrence Edwards earlier in the show mentioned Trey Blount there as well. I'd take a little bit of a flyer on Trey right now. And the reason why I would is because we know he plays physical. He played a ton in 2017 because of that. And when they have thrown the ball to him, he's caught it. He was also like a legitimate 4-star guy coming out of high school. This guy had opportunities to go play some football. Played at a great program at Pace Academy. This doesn't matter, but he's really close with Jamari Salyer and Andrew Thomas, the other 2 guys that have played there. It is not the wildest thing in the world to say that Trey Blount could be, of all the players in this Georgia roster, the one that provides the most pleasant surprise. I'd take a little bit of a flyer on Blount doing that.
Yeah, if you're selling stock in Georgia wide receivers right now, I mean, I've got all the Dominic Blaylock stock I can get my hands on, so I'm clearly in that business. I'd buy a little bit of Trey Blount. I'd dabble in that and put that in my investment.
I almost think about it, too. It's almost like a Kentucky Derby long shot at 50-1 or something like that, 30-1. A little bit of a gamble, but kind of a fun one there as well. And Dante Edey and others, you can say you were right about that when it turns out to be true. Richard Pollard says, what about Tommy Bush? Richard, I'm going to say the same thing about Bush that I said about Landers. And really, I think that my assumption right now is that Landers is ahead of Bush. And that is just an assumption based on gathering the facts that are available to me. And obviously, I'm only seeing a small window of practice and only judging most of this based on the things that Kirby Smart has said. And yet, given that little bit of evidence I've been able to collect, I do believe that Bush starts the summer behind Matt Landers, who I believe is behind some of these others. So I think the climb for Bush is maybe a little bit more significant even than it is for Landers. However, the Holloman story from a year ago shows you that surprises do happen. Holloman played better last year than summer predictions would have expected. So it's not an impossibility for Landers or Bush either, but I think that Bush is probably behind Landers right now. And Sounds like you think so too, Connor.
Yeah, I mean, watching the spring game, it was clear they were trying to get the ball to Matt Landers to sort of see what he could do and if he could come down with some of those contested catches and use his size and athletic ability to his advantage. And I think that tells me. And they could have tried to do the same thing with Tommy Bush, but didn't. And I think Landers being a focal point in the spring game was something that they really wanted to see. One quick thing on Blaylock. I know it's a bold prediction. I've watched this guy play at the high school level. I know people who have watched him play at the high school level. He doesn't maybe have the tangibles that, George Pickens does, Demetrius Robertson does, but he is just a really, really good football player, and I think with a guy like him, that is going to translate to the next level, and it's not something that's totally quantifiable, and I know you have to go out there on an edge, but sometimes there are just guys who, for whatever reason, they end up being better football players than their measure will suggest, and I think that's actually going to be the case with Blaylock.
Can I make a suggestion about one thing? Jeff was watching 2 seconds ago, and I think he commented from the dog. Like, when any of us comment on Facebook, it shows up as DawgNation because we're administrators in the DawgNation account, and you don't care about that. I think we got to start putting our initials.
Yeah.
Because yesterday I was commenting on there, and people thought it was Connor. And I believe the comment from DawgNation is he's hearing that Dom is turning heads already with some of his typical wow catches he means during summer workouts. That's Jeff, right? Or is that you?
That's Jeff.
So I think we got to start putting initials. We all have different
Fair
initials.
Enough. Yeah, that's
You're
fine.
CR, I'm BA, he's JS, MG.
Just saying.
Yeah, just saying. People get that confused. Lingo. I feel like we need to start doing that.
Yeah. One other nugget on Georgia wide receivers. Tyler Simmons is a name, so people have listed off their top 4. I'm not seeing that a whole lot. I would caution against that.
Yeah, he's in my top 4 right now.
He had limited touches a season ago, but one, we already know he's a very good blocker, and that's someone who Kirby Smart will play and will put him ahead of guys who might have higher upside just because he's willing to block.
He's also fast.
Do you know how many yards he averaged per touch that combines catch and rush last year?
I'm going to say it's like 15 or so.
19.2.
Wow. That's
4
good
touchdowns on 13 total touches. I mean, obviously you wish the sample size was a little bit bigger there, but that is something.
I mean, I will give you my full opinion that if Holloman's still here, I don't know that Simmons is in my top 4 because but now that the trusted source is gone, now that your dependable weapon is gone, Simmons becomes Mr. Dependable, which opens up the door, I think, for more of the new shiny toys. I think Holloman's absence, the guy that steps in to benefit from that most, is to me probably Simmons, who all of a sudden now becomes the veteran that you kind of lean on there for just a little bit.
Yep. One thing Tony Barnhart brought up that I think has kind of sort of gotten a little bit lost, as much as we enjoy projecting forward and looking forward at things, when it does come to Holloman, it's not like he had a huge statistical year last year. He was pretty clearly probably the 4th, maybe even 5th, depending on how they used Terry Godwin in some games, wide receiver a year ago. So, to Barnhart's point, while yes, it's certainly a projection, it is still a loss. It's not like he was going to turn into Jerry Jeudy, Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper. It's not necessarily that it was a given. He had a nice season a year ago, but it's not like he was, Calvin Johnson.
I think there was a chance, and I've said this before, this is not revisionist history. I think there was a chance that had Holloman played, he wasn't Georgia's leading receiver. I think there was a chance that someone could have overtaken him. I think he would have definitely been one of Georgia's 2 or 3 leading receivers, but someone overtaking him for the number 1 spot, I think that's a possibility. I like Hashim Spike's comment on YouTube, who says that Blaylock reminds me of Jerry Rice, which if you're going with the pull quote for today's show, comparing Dominic Blaylock to Jerry Rice may be a pretty good one. But I get his point, though. He says his measurables don't jump out, but he gets it done consistently. And I think this is a really important thing to say, that it's the measurables for Blaylock that probably prevented him from being a 5-star.
Yep.
But y'all, I mean, Mike Johnson saw him play in person, and he was on the show this week, said, oh my gosh, we have probably more video of Blaylock than any other player in the 2020 class. The video speaks for itself. Blaylock played like 4 games on TV this year. Most of us saw all of those. Kind of on and on you could go. His measurables keep him from being a 5-star, but we've seen with our own eyes the guy plays football, and I'm just a big believer that stuff like that matters. Gil Brandt had this tweet the other day, and I know a lot of people, maybe don't necessarily care about his analysis anymore, but he kind of talked about, for like an NFL standpoint, like what his baseline numbers that he's looking at for all these different, position types are, and the kind of 40 time he's looking for from receivers running the 40-yard dash. And I think it's really interesting that we get so used to hearing about these manufactured, made-up 40 times. So-and-so ran a 3.940 or 4.240, these crazy times, that most of that kind of stuff is an exaggeration anyway. And a lot of that kind of stuff skews what the average speed for a receiver is, but because all we ever hear about are the so-called 4.3 40s, we have a tendency to believe that anybody who doesn't run that is slow. But the fact of the matter is, most people don't run these really crazy top-end 40s. You don't have to be the fastest. You just have to be fast enough. Dominic Blaylock nor George Pickens is the fastest receiver, and yet I believe that in college they're going to be fast enough.
Right, some of these guys, they're not always playing against the best high school competition. Dominic Blaylock was playing at the highest level in Georgia high school football, which in my belief is the best high school, especially in the metro area. And once you get into the playoffs and you work those South Georgia teams in, I believe it's the best high school football in the country in terms of offense and defense, because Lord knows they don't play a lick of defense in Texas.
That's true. Connor's right about that.
So he's proven it against great guys. He destroyed a North Gwinnett team that I believe had 3 Division I defensive backs on their team, including a guy, Warren Burrell, who's going to be at Tennessee next year. He's proven against elite competition already that he is a capable receiver. He had 3 touchdowns in the All-American game, and somehow after that game, people decided, you know what, he's not a 5-star wide receiver anymore. So, and I would also like to point out that over the past decade, the greatest action star, Vin Diesel, plays a character named Dom Toretto, best action star of the 2010s.
That's true. I do think Dominic is a very strong name. Mm-hmm. Jeff was in the comment section earlier saying he thinks the milkshake nickname sticks because when we were at Marlowe's, Dom drank a milkshake there because I guess his mom makes one for him every night. I'm more in favor of the other nicknames we've put out there, Dom the Bomb. Somebody else had an even better one than that. What was the one that I really liked? The Dominator that we've had. Somebody had one that I love. Oh, Big Play Blay.
Big Play Blay.
I like Big Play Blay a lot. I really like that a lot.
There's a lot of
one of y'all invented that.
There's a lot of Jerry Rice comparisons here. Let's put in the cart before the horse. I don't want to necessarily compare Dominic Blaylock to the greatest compiler of all time.
Yeah, listen, you don't know anything about the 80s. Don't start talking about these 80s guys.
He's Jerry Rice is no Randy Moss. So.
Anyway, all right, we're gonna get ready to wrap up here in a little bit.
Ooh, here's one. This is really good. This might be my new favorite, by Matt Talley. Dom Cruz.
I do like that. I like that. I don't mind that. Dom Cruz. I don't mind that.
I really like that. Mission Impossible. Get some highlights of Tom Cruise running and put Dom Blaylock's face on it. I like that.
Let me get Maurice Farmer for a moment because we don't talk about this topic enough. Who replaces J.R. Reed next year? That could be one of two things, both as the vocal leader for the defense, which I believe that Reed is right now, and that particular safety spot. Now, they'd cross-trained LeCount over there a little bit during the spring. There's also a chance that LeCount could bolt for the NFL, given the fact that he's going to be one of these relatively highly regarded juniors. So, Connor, I'll let you field both those questions. On-field leader, I think that LeCount's clearly – I'm sorry. I believe that Reed is clearly the most vocal guy for this Georgia defense right now. And in that particular safety role, how do you see that unfolding?
As far as an on-field leader next year, I'm going to say Monty Rice because I feel pretty comfortable that he's going to be returning next year. For certain, I would like to say Eric Stokes, but I'm not. I could certainly envision in a world where he has a very good year and is draft eligible and goes to play in the pros next year.
I mean, I think this, to my knowledge, Stokes is clearly more vocal than Rice is. And yet you're right that sometimes these defensive backs, if they got a chance to bounce, they're going to do that.
I would mention Nolan Smith as well. If he has a solid year this year, I could certainly see him sort of doing that a year from now. Just knowing
because he's not going to shy away from talking.
No.
He's not going to shy away from doing that.
And as far as the comment sections have a comment section on Facebook has picked my answer for who's going to replace Dean or replace Reed. It's Lewis Cine.
Yeah,
that guy opened some eyes this spring. As well as Nakobe Dean played and Nolan Smith played, he had the best spring day or G day of any freshman on the team. So I think he's a guy who sort of that in the box type safety is someone who's going to help out Georgia a lot. And Otis Reese is a candidate as well. It seems like only a few weeks ago people were ready to bench Richard LeCount for Otis Reese at safety. I mean, there's certainly a world where LeCount and Reed are both gone next year, and Reese and Scene step right in, and I'm not sure there's a whole big talent gap between them a year from now.
Yeah, listen, I'm not wishing Richard LeCount out the door at all, but if he were to leave this year to go to the NFL draft, to think that Georgia's 2020 safeties are Otis Reese and Louis Scene, that is a pretty good situation to be in, and one of the reasons why, even though the names will be different for Georgia in 2020, at least in a lot of spots, those safeties are the perfect example of why I think that Georgia is still a legitimate national championship contender in 2020. By the way, Kenneth Wiggins in our Facebook comment section, and y'all don't like it, we don't talk football, so I'll spend 9 seconds on this. Since somebody mentioned Tom Cruise, he mentioned the threat or a challenge of a fight between Cruise and Justin Bieber. Mm-hmm. Who do you think wins that fight?
Tom Cruise in 15 seconds.
Yeah, I do too. I think Cruise wins.
Cruise tries to do it do it in a halo jump, like jumping 15,000 feet to the ground. Bieber's like, I just want to fight you in the octagon. He's like, let's drop an octagon and fight midair. Tom Cruise wins that fight easily.
Yeah, listen, I think that when you have two people of similar stature, and Cruise is not a big guy, I'm actually going to take, believe it or not, the older guy than the younger guy. I think there's something too old man strong in this case now, because Cruise is pushing 60.
Mm-hmm.
He's
57.
He's well into his 50s.
He's now 5 years older than Wilford Brimley was when Wilford Brimley started Cocoon.
It's just mind blowing, but it is indeed true. Shannon Baker says that Louis Scene, the safety, was all over the field. Going back to G-Day, we all had a chance to see him, and I think that he's going to be leveling some big hits for Georgia. I think he's on the field this year doing some things for the Dogs, and I think it could be even bigger, obviously, in 2020, so I think that's a really good name to mention. Let's see what else we got. Memphis Dog says Bieber does his own stunts, breaking out of a paper bag. I'm not even sure that Justin Bieber could do that. For sure. Paul K. going back to the top of the show. Mark Richt is a GD for sure. And, Connor, I know you actually kind of covered the Richt era at that time as kind of a student journalist in training. I liked hearing from Richt on today's show. I thought it was good from 680 The Fan, and it just does kind of remind me of what I liked about Richt. I'm glad to hear he's still cheering for Kirby. Wouldn't expect any less. Obviously, Kirby's taking the program, I believe, to a level that Richt didn't really have it at, but I still think there's an opportunity to appreciate both coaches. It did me some good to hear from Richt on today's program.
Yeah, I think a lot of Georgia fans would have actually liked to have seen his time at Miami end a little bit better. I think, obviously they would never want to see Miami do better than Georgia. But, when Miami was doing really well in 2017 and Georgia was doing really well in 2017, I think that made a lot of Georgia fans feel good, and they would have been very excited at the potential prospect of Georgia playing Miami in a playoff game because, as much as a lot of people were ready to move on from him at the end of his tenure, a lot of people, I think rightfully so, really look back fondly at how he was able to elevate the Georgia program to where Kirby was able to come in and within 2 years take it to that truly super elite level.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm seeing a lot of nice messages, RT367 others, about our upcoming vacation. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for allowing us to take it. And I mean that. I don't mean that flippantly because, listen, y'all have been great to support us throughout the off season here and give us the freedom to step away for a week. We appreciate that. And just know that 2 Mondays from now, I'm going to be back sitting in the spot, rearing and ready to go for what is going to be a rocking ride all the way through the 2019 season into the recruiting cycle and all that kind of stuff as well. We just hope it's going to be the biggest year yet for DawgNation. We think it will be, and potentially the biggest year yet for UGA in quite some time too. So I can't wait for all of that. Thank you all for making all that possible for us. Huge thanks to Kroger for making DawgNation Daily possible today. I will also say thanks as well to R.S. Andrews for the R.S. Andrews cool down, because even on a busy and full show, we still wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for your comments, and we appreciate you all sharing them. R.S. Andrews makes it possible, so while I'm gone, if you wake up one morning and you're like, boy, it's too hot in here, that means your air conditioning may be on the blink, and that means you want to check out my friends at R.S. Andrews and their $99 Smiley tune-up, which will get your system back to factory fresh specs and keep you cool all summer long, which is a really important thing. Find them online, Dari and the whole gang over there at rsandrews.com. Also, while I'm gone, don't forget to check out on all your Atlanta news now at ajc.com every single day. Stay up to date on the news that's happening in your community. A lot of big stuff happening in the world right now. And, while I enjoy talking football for a living and enjoy really making that a part of, what my daily life is. The fact is I want to still stay up to date on everything else happening in the world. And so my world includes Atlanta. And that means I get my Atlanta news now from AJC.com. I hope you'll check that out. Y'all have a great week. I know you got 4th of July coming up. For those of you with family and friends, I hope it's just filled with fun and cookouts and swimming pools and everything else. And I'll do the same, and then see you back here in this spot next Monday, a week from now, for DawgNation Daily once again. Y'all have a great weekend, great week. We shall talk to you soon.